Rob, Judy, people may have sticker shock. The Cook County Treasurer's Office has been analyzing the new tax bills and says that citywide, the median residential bill jumped more than 16%. That's the biggest increase in at least 30 years. The Treasurer's Office says city spending increased and there are fewer commercial spaces to pay their share of the pie. And the hardest hit, predominantly black and brown communities on the south and west sides. In West Garfield Park, bills soared 133%. North Lawndale saw a 99% spike. And in Inglewood, taxes climbed more than 80%. The treasurer says many of those homes have been undervalued before the most recent assessment, which is done every 3 years.
No, you did not just mishear that. Cook County, which is the county that contains the city of Chicago, where Brandon Johnson is the mayor in the city of Chicago, recently dropped its new property tax assessments. Those assessments are done every 3 years, and due to horrible fiscal policy by Brandon Johnson, horrible business policy that has driven businesses out of the city of Chicago, the Cook County property tax assessor decided to get their pound of flesh from the homeowners of the city of Chicago, and specifically the homeowners that they targeted are the black and brown communities on the west and south side of Chicago, the very same communities that Brandon Johnson is always pretending that he's protecting from evil white racism and the reemergence of the Confederacy. And of course, due to the fact that his policies are absolutely terrible, they were the ones hit the absolute hardest, and now the residents of those very same communities who form part of the backbone of Brandon Johnson's coalition are absolutely pissed. They are livid. Again, 16% property tax increases overall for the city of Chicago based on this new assessment, but disproportionately, the people who are facing 90% or over 100% increases are in those very black and brown communities that Brandon Johnson is always pretending that he is the champion of. And this is what we're going to talk about today. How Brandon Johnson is absolutely done. He is cooked in Cook County, if you want to use that terminology. But before we get into that, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
Well, people have gathered here tonight at Harmony Community Church here in Lawndale as they're trying to light the way to fairness with this bonfire and discussion tonight. Many homeowners across Chicago receiving a hefty property tax increase in the mail, and they're all wondering where that money is going.
So that is the multi-billion-dollar question that residents of Chicago are finally asking, specifically those black and brown residents, as they feel like the money that they are contributing is always going up in the city of Chicago. However, they are not getting improved public services. Now, of course, we all know where that money is going. Brandon Johnson has worked tirelessly in order to fund the teachers union.
The mayor also defending his plan to sweep $1 billion in TIF funds, more than half of which would go to Chicago public schools.
What do you say to those who might see this as a budget for CPS, a reward for your allies?
A TIF surplus goes to our city colleges. It goes to our parks. It goes to our libraries.
But the majority goes to CPS.
Well, because that's the way the law is designed.
Right.
And so investing in CPS, that's a good thing, right?
A key part of his constituency, by the way, an organization that he has not resigned from as he has become the mayor of Chicago. He is only on leave from Chicago Public Schools. And of course, it goes to a bunch of woke social programs in order to hire on young black youths to try to pay off this constituency, while Brandon Johnson is pretending that it's going to law enforcement and things that would actually be useful for the city of Chicago.
I can't live in hypothetical. What I can say is that we're talking about a community safety fund that will strictly go to ensuring that the mental health and well-being of our police officers is secure.
Well, the majority of that is going for the summer youth jobs, half of it.
Hiring people is a part of our safety plan. In fact, this is why this budget is so critical, right? Because this budget protects us from Trump's cuts.
Now look, we have covered the budget woes in the city of Chicago multiple different times on this channel, but of course, the news constantly gets consistently worse because Brandon Johnson has lost the Democrats that make up the city council. They're called wards in the city of Chicago because they don't want to pass any of his so-called progressive tax increases, and they don't want to raise property taxes because obviously, even without an actual written into law increase, this new adjustment caused this much backlash. So you could only imagine how much worse it would get if they actually wrote it into the law that they were going to participate in these property tax increases. And obviously the residents are angry. They understand that, by the way, in addition to the two things that I highlighted, that this money is also going to illegal aliens who made it to the sanctuary city, the welcoming city that is the city of Chicago. And Brandon Johnson has a lot to answer for because, again, while the teachers union definitely is the organization that is funding him the most, his voting base is in these very black neighborhoods that he constantly panders to, and they're the ones getting hit the hardest. And by the way, the reason they're getting hit the hardest is due to Brandon Johnson's horrible fiscal policy and horrible regulatory environment. And if you don't believe me, take a listen to this expert right here.
Treasurer Maria Pappas says there has been a sharp drop in the value of downtown commercial buildings, paying about $120 million less this cycle. That's because of higher vacancy rates over the years.
It went down in a landslide, and it's coming back like a snail, slowly, very slowly, and not fast enough to handle these residences who are carrying the burden of it, because many of them are unrented. Many of these places are unrented. The taxes went down. What happened was the residences ended up picking up the bulk of these tax increases.
So right there, you just heard from the Cook County Treasurer on why property taxes had to go up so much. And of course, the reason that is given is because so many businesses in Cook County, specifically in the city of Chicago, have left the city of Chicago. Vacancies are up. We've done stories on this channel about all of the Walmarts in Chicago closing and other situations like that due to the fact that crime spiked in the city of Chicago. And according to the way that they do property taxes in Cook County, they have to counterbalance that, especially when there's a massive budget deficit, in order to compensate for the missing revenue by shifting the tax burden to the residents. And specifically, as we talked about in the beginning of this segment, it is the black and brown communities that are picking up the tab. And again, while I don't relish the fact that these people are suffering, that they're confronted with bills that are absolutely blowing them away, in reality, these people overwhelmingly backed Brandon Johnson's racial campaign for the mayor of the city of Chicago, and this is the result of putting an irresponsible spender in office. And again, that's not coming from me, that is coming from the Cook County Treasurer. And I got news for you guys. The officials in Cook County, like the officials in Illinois, like the officials in the city of Chicago, are all Democrats. So the Democrats are looking at the numbers, they're looking at the math, and they are realizing that Brandon Johnson is an objectively horrible mayor when it comes to spending policy, taxation policy, and regulatory policy. But I want to point something out for the residents of the city of Chicago that Brandon Johnson tried to smuggle into a local news interview that I thought was a giant red flag at the time, and in fact made commentary on it at the time, that now all of a sudden, with the hindsight of these new assessments, is all the more understandable. And that is this clip right here, where Brandon Johnson is making the case that somehow the Trump tax cuts are going to cause automatic tax increases in the city of Chicago.
The mayor's office clarifying that the corporate taxes prevent the need for any layoffs or a property tax hike at a time when Johnson says Trump's tax cuts are hurting working people.
We're talking about an additional $1,200 per year on average that working people will assume because of Donald Trump's cuts to the ultra rich.
Now, to be clear, this is 100% not how this works. If they make federal tax cuts in the federal tax rate or the federal corporate tax rate, that does not in any way, shape, or form somehow trigger tax increases on the local level. But what I think Brandon Johnson was doing right there was floating that idea out there because he understood, because they have the same data and the same numbers that they have over in Cook County about the city of Chicago, that the property tax increases were coming out soon, and he wanted to have a built-in excuse for how he could blame President Trump, even though, again, according to the Cook County Treasurer, it is all 100% on the way that the city of Chicago runs their own city. So Brandon Johnson, very sneaky in that previous interview, saying something that I originally thought was just him being an absolute idiot, but in reality, it was him basically laying the groundwork for blaming Trump for the property tax increases that his core constituency was going to feel. But the thing is, that constituency is not buying it. They are not reacting in the way that they need to vote in a new president and get tax increases, because that will magically, through the transitive property, lower their property taxes. They are looking at other alternatives in order to stop this nonsense from happening. Let us get into that.
How can you maintain your home if your taxes are constantly going up?
Homeowners in Lawndale are searching for answers together tonight about their property tax hikes. Community leaders partnered with the Lawndale Christian Development Corporation to host this bonfire, allowing neighbors to discuss their options. One man says he received a bill this week that was $977 more than what he paid last year.
Tax increases tied to a TIF that I have no idea why. Ogden-Pulaski TIF is collecting money from our neighbors in our streets, but we're not being notified for what or why it's in the bill.
So as you see right there, you have black residents gathering together. They're saying that they don't understand why there's all these line items on their property tax bills, but they're not seeing those increases in services. And they're actually looking to the state of California. And by the way, this is old California, who actually passed a ballot initiative to cap the property taxes in the city of Chicago to 1% of home value. And in addition to that, cap increases to 2% annually in order to prevent this kind of sticker shock from happening. And it's described as sticker shock throughout most of the local news segments because, again, overall property taxes went up 16%, but in these neighborhoods that have been assessed by Cook County to be undervalued for decades in the city of Chicago, they have gone up to 90% more or over 100% more. And again, I will also point out for everybody out there in the audience that people like Brandon Johnson always talk about the disadvantages that all these different various black and brown communities have had, but apparently, according to Cook County, they've been heavily advantaged in terms of their property taxes based on the fact that they were artificially low compared to other neighborhoods. Therefore, that was the biggest point of revenue generation that they could actually find.
The group discussed a number of solutions for the issue, including an effort to propose new policy, which would be modeled after California's Prop 13. That would limit property taxes to 1% of assessed value, with annual increases capped at 2%.
Now, look, a lot of people in the state of California will tell you that there are problems with Prop 13, that it created issues in terms of funding for all these different various things. However, some people would say that the trade-offs are worth it, and I might be among those people, because in reality, property taxes are not supposed to be an endless stream of revenue for the government that make you feel like you don't actually own your home. What they're supposed to cover are basic services related to property, like the fire department, like other basic things like the school system in and around the area, as a mechanism in order to keep the community going. But again, they should be kept to a minimum, because what you're actually trying to do is make them affordable, but also have people pay for the protection and the benefits that they get for having their property located in that area. Now, of course, I know Florida is trying to move in the direction where they get rid of property taxes altogether. I understand that movement and whatnot, but in reality, I am not in agreement with people that say a property tax means forever that you don't own your property, the government does, because the fact is, yeah, if you have a state-run fire department, they should be paid for in some way, and I am a fan of having taxes tied into the purpose of the thing that you're paying for. You want your property protected, you want to be able to call the fire department when they come, you pay for that via the property tax, much in the same way that a gas tax or tolls are what you use or what is supposed to be used in order for you to pay for the roads. I think things go awry when you start taking money from pot A in order to cover expense B, and that really becomes a major issue. In fact, I'm somebody who often criticizes the fact that huge portions of tolls and gas taxes being paid by the drivers don't go to actually maintaining the infrastructure for the drivers, and in fact go to subsidize things like mass transit, when the fare for mass transit should cover the costs of those options. But Brandon Johnson believes the opposite. He believes all the money in the city of Chicago is his, and he permits you to keep a certain amount, and every time he spends on some frivolous dumbass program, he refers to that as an investment. But the thing is, that rhetoric is not being bought by the residents of the city of Chicago.
Homeowners are also frustrated because they feel like they're not seeing the tax hikes lead to notable investment in their neighborhoods.
There's been a divestment in this community for the most part, but it seems like now that people have found an interest in reclaiming the neighborhood, now it's like we're being taxed for prosperity.
I just want to say I absolutely love it. And even though these people voted the wrong way in the previous Chicago mayoral election disproportionately, it's nice to hear them say, wait a minute, our neighborhood is improving, by the way, not due to city so-called investment, due to the fact that people are moving here, we're cleaning up our houses, we're doing all sorts of things as a community, and all of a sudden we're getting hit extremely hard for our prosperity, and now these people realize that punishing success is not a good thing. All it took was a socialist race baiter candidate to take over after the previous one be worse than her in every possible way, the importation of a bunch of illegal immigrants, thanks to the state of Texas, and by the way, thanks more so to the sanctuary laws in the city of Chicago, to change the opinion of this core Brandon Johnson constituency as represented by this individual right here, and all the people who have gathered to come out against this increase.
Cook County Treasurer Maria Pappas also spoke earlier today on the tax bills while at a Rainbow Push event. She says there are new avenues for homeowners to pay these bills at their own pace.
You do not have to pay your bill on December 15th. Did you hear that? You don't have to pay it. Let me tell you why. We went to Springfield last year and set up a payment plan.
Pappas says you could go online on December 16th and find payment plans for up to 13 months. That's welcome news to these homeowners, but they still want some clarity on those tax hikes.
So look, the Cook County Treasurer is saying that you don't have to come up with this money next month, and that's supposed to be a good thing. But in reality, stretching out payments doesn't actually change the facts on the ground, which is these people are facing massive property tax increases, and you saying pay it over time may be instant relief for them, but it doesn't address the core issue, which is, of course, Brandon Johnson's terrible budgeting and how it acts as a betrayal to the very constituency he's always bending over backwards to praise and say that he is the defender of.
We understand utilities are going up and things of that nature, but it's a valuation issue. Like we don't have schools we need, those economics that aren't here, but we're being charged to pay for economics in other people's communities.
Look, I don't love this situation because I don't want people to suffer in my country, but I do love the response. I do love the fact that people are realizing that Brandon Johnson is a huckster, and even though he talks about how the Confederacy is around every corner and how every issue is an issue of slavery, these people are realizing that the people who are actually paying the brunt of it are in their communities. They are suffering as a consequence of Brandon Johnson's regime, and in reality, they would likely be better off without him. And obviously, they need to clean up the budget, put pressure on the city council, the board of supervisors as they're called, I think, in the city of Chicago, and make the change in the next election that is necessary to see better results. But of course, I want to know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. Is this well-deserved just desserts for the black residents of the city of Chicago? Is this a necessary step in order to get better representation in that city? Or is this just same old, and it's not going to change anything at all whatsoever, and Brandon Johnson will be elected to a second term, a third term, and eventually will be the president of the United States of America? Again, all your thoughts down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Brandon Johnson, disappointing his black base. Till next time.